Yourself? Eric? Eric?
We got Rob from us. Other folks?
Sarah.
Okay. Got everybody? All right. Okay.
David, sorry.
Yes, I know that. I knew when you said it.
Worst of your words.
Oh, well, they're not my words.
Yeah.
They're the words of the Torah, but here we go. Hi, everybody. I am substituting for Rabbi Diane, and I'm Jill, Rabbi Jill Hammer. And I'm excited to get to learn Torah with you this morning. For anybody who might not know me, I'm a member of Romemu, and I live around the corner. And we're going to work on we're going to work on Parshat Matot this morning. So let's say the bracha for Torah study. Please join me or repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So Parshat Matot talks about the stabs, and it also has a significant section on vows. And so I want to talk about vows. I specifically want to talk about the section on women and vows. But in doing that, I want to talk about what the role of vows was in ancient Israelite community. Because one of the important spiritual practices of ancient Israelites was taking vows. There was a particular kind of cultural emphasis around this related to women. And I want to talk about the ways that taking a vow was a kind of spiritual offering that you could give as a layperson, right? There were certain kinds of rituals that you had to go to a priest, right, or a professional to take care of them, right? If you wanted to make an offering in the temple, right, you had to bring it to a priest, right? We don't know exactly what was going on in the villages. It might not have been there that way everywhere, but it was certainly described that way in Jerusalem. Right, you had to go to a priest. And if you wanted a message from God, right, at least according to the Torah, right, you had to go to a prophet, right? But a vow was something you could take no matter who you were. It didn't matter if you were educated. It didn't matter if you had a high status, right? If you made a vow, you had an intimate, personal relationship with the divine, right? So vows were something that people did, right, in order to create that very personal relationship. And they are particularly taken around very important and scary issues in people's lives. Like people would often make vows around war, like that, you know, someone should come back from the war, right? That was that's a case that we see a lot. And vows were so important. And so it was so important that people carry them out that the Torah was, in its patriarchal mode, was worried about vows influencing people's marriages. Because, what if you vowed that you were going to go live in a cave for 3 months, and then, they worried about how is that going to impact your family, right? So that's a little bit of the section that we're going to read. This is connected to our practice on Yom Kippur, right? Because the rabbis of the Talmud actually decided, right, that they wanted people to stop making vows, right? It was considered such a serious practice and potentially dangerous to the individual who took the vow, because God forbid you didn't fulfill it. Right, there would be something really bad might happen to you, right? There was really a concern about that. And so the rabbis of the Talmud say, no more vows. We're not going to make them, right? And eventually we have this practice on Kol Nidre of annulling any vows we might have happened to make by mistake, right? That's so that's kind of the history of our Kol Nidre practice. Is this a very intense practice of making vows from ancient Israel? So let's look a little bit at the text, which I know was just shared. Hi, everybody on Zoom. I know was just shared on Zoom and the folks have in the room. All right, so here is our section on vows from Numbers 30. Moses spoke to the heads of the Israelite tribes saying, this is what God has commanded. It looks to me like the English has been messed up a little bit here, so if it's a little awkward, forgive me, I'm going to do my best. Moses spoke to the heads of the Israelite tribes saying, this is what God has commanded. If a person makes a vow or takes an oath imposing an obligation on himself, right, he shall not break his pledge. He must carry out all that has crossed his lips. So this is the ordinary case, right? In the Torah, this is the case for men and unattached women. That a person who makes a vow has to fulfill the vow, right? Notice there's nothing here about annulling the vow, but he has to make the vow. It looks like when this file was printed, the English got reversed. So you're going to have to rely on me a little bit. I'm sorry, although you can kind of figure it out. So that's the ordinary case, right? A person who makes a vow or takes an obligation, they cannot break it. Point number one. Gesundheit. Mark. If a woman makes a vow to her or assumes an obligation while still in her father's household by reason of her youth, right? So this is a young woman. And her father learns of her vow or her self-imposed obligation and offers no objection, all her vows shall stand and every self-imposed obligation shall stand. So in other words, so they're talking about a minor girl, right? They're not talking about a minor boy. I'm actually not even sure what the case is for a minor boy, but they're worried here, right? This is really in their mode as enforcers of the patriarchal family, right? They're worried that she's going to make a vow like, I'm going to go live in Spain. Right. And then her father won't get to make a marriage agreement for her, right? He won't get all of the normal things he would get in ancient Israelite society. So they're concerned about this case, right? She's going to make a vow, I'm never going to marry, right? Or something like that, right? And this might give her a significant level of autonomy. So the text is a little worried about that. Ideally, we're not worried about that, but the text is a little worried about that. And her father learns of her vow or her self-imposed obligation and offers no objection. All her vows shall stand and every self-imposed obligation shall stand. But if her father restrains her on the day he finds out, none of her vows or self-imposed obligations shall stand, and God will forgive her since her father restrained. So what's the case we're talking about? Right? Describe the situation, right? What's happening in the house? Right, at the breakfast table. What does this look like? Right. The young woman says, I vow to, I don't know.
Never marry.
I vow to never marry. Father doesn't say anything. Right, the vow is legit. The father immediately says, that's not okay. I don't want you to vow that. The vow is annulled. If she should become, all right, so that's the, so that's basically the case. However, we also hear later on, right, if he doesn't say anything, he can't go back and change it later. Like, so the text puts some restraint, right, on the father's authority, right? And actually, this is also on the husband's authority, right? He puts some restraint. He can't just say later on, well, now I don't like your vow, right? Now I'm going to annul it. It has to be the second he hears it. Right? Otherwise, it's not legit. So the text is trying to make some kind of compromise, right, between what they understand to be the father's authority, right, and sort of being fair to God, to whom this vow has been offered. So there's kind of a compromise happening. Yeah.
Can you just define what a vow is?
What is a vow? Great, thank you. So what does a vow look like? when I was a kid and people said, I swear to God, right, the adults would get upset. That's a vestigial remnant of this, right? That I might say, right, this is not a vow, don't listen to me, heaven, right? I might say, right, I promise God that, right? I will eat X thing for a month, or, right? And whatever the vow was, it usually was something like, I will be a Nazir, right? A Nazir, and we're going to talk about Nazir in a second. A Nazir is a person who has vowed not to drink alcohol, right? And not to eat grapes and not to cut their hair. So a typical vow would be, I will be a Nazir for a month, right? That was considered some kind of special offering to God to take that restriction on yourself, right? So it could be that, but it could also be, I will make a pilgrimage, right? It could also be, right, I will refrain from, eating meat or something like that, right? The Talmud gives many examples of what this vow might look like, but it's often, I will be a Nazir. Please.
I was gonna say, could you delineate the difference between a neder and a shvua?
You mean, why does it say? Yeah, I don't know if there's a legal distinction. The Talmudic term they use is neder, but what's happening in Kol Nidre, when they said all the vows and all the oaths and they're really just using synonyms in order to make sure that they've covered every possible situation. So I don't know what the legal distinction between a neder and a shvua would be. But it might be that a neder is to God and a shvua is to other people. I'm not sure. But it's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah. But the term the Talmud uses for vows between people and God is neder, right? That's what it looks like.
No, but it's specifically asking God to do X.
Yes.
And if you do
Right.
X, I will do
Yeah.
Y.
Well, usually it's not an if. Usually it's I will be a neder. I'm sorry, I will be a Nazir, right? And I'm asking for you to return. Or maybe they do make it conditional like that, because often the Talmud doesn't take it that way. But maybe they do make it conditional. Like if my son will return from war, right? Then I will be a Nazir. Yeah, that's how they might do it. But they also might just make it directly. Like, for example, the Talmud gives a case of someone who's at a bar with their friends, and they say, "I will be a Nazir for a month." And the Talmud asks, if they were drunk, does it count? Right? How intoxicated do they have to be for their vow not to count? Right? So that's a case where it's not conditional, but it's just like they're just kind of showing off to their friends. Someone in the chat is saying something about neder versus shvua, which I cannot see, but maybe we can read it.
Neder versus shvua, I think that.
One is I shall do and one is I shall refrain. That's interesting. Thank you. I'll check it out, Ashraim. Thank you very much. Anything else in the chat that we should attend to? No, I think we're good. Okay. All right. So let's actually look at the second page. We're going to go to the end of this section. And then we're going to look at some famous cases of Nidarim that would relate to this section of Matot on vows and women. So every vow and every sworn obligation, right? So the Hebrew of that is kol neder v'kol shvua, of self-denial, may be upheld by her husband or annulled by her husband, right? This is in the case of the patriarchal family. And if her husband offers no objection from that day to the next, he has upheld all the vows or obligations she has assumed. He has upheld them by offering no objection on the day he found out. Now, one of the reasons they do it like this is so it cannot be used as a punishment. Right? I'm annulling your vow because, you burned my eggs this morning, right? They don't want a case like that, right? So they say it's either right away or it's not at all.
Do vows have to be articulated? Yes.
Yes, they have to. I don't know if they have to have a witness to count. But this is the assumption here is that it's being articulated in front of the family. So it makes sense that would be the case, right? Right. And the case is when they hear it the first time, right? That's the case. right? But if he annuls them after the day he finds out, he shall bear her guilt, right? That is, if this husband or father makes her not fulfill her vow, not in the case that the Torah is talking about, then it's on him, right? Any punishment for breaking the vow is his fault, right? If he annuls her vow in in a way that the Torah doesn't think is okay. Right, if he knows them after the day he finds out, he shall bear her guilt, enjoined upon Moses as between a husband, right, and his wife, and between a father and his daughter while in her father's household by reason of her youth. If you're a widow or a divorcee, you're off the hook, right? And right, in a contemporary family, right, we wouldn't think about it like this, right? But this is how the Torah thinks about it. But what's interesting to me is always what's under the text. Like, what is the reality that's happening that gives rise to these laws? And for me, what I'm curious about is what kinds of vows are people taking, right, that causes the Torah to make these, right, to make these declarations, right? What is the societal pressure of vowing, right, that is causing the Torah to be worried about the impact of that vowing on relationships between men and women? So is what I'm saying clear? Yeah, please.
Is there a similar description or about vows that a man would take? Because that equally impacts family structure.
You are absolutely right, but guess what? There's only one verse about it. It's at the beginning of our section that we just read, right? Basically, right, and this is typical of Israelite patriarchy, right? If men make vows, nothing happens except that they have to fulfill them. Right? Nobody can annul them. Like, that's not how it works, right? They're only worried about women making vows.
So the man could go and say,
Right? He can say
for 2 months.
right. He can say, I vow to move to Paris, right? And she does not get to annul those vows. So that's right. That's the unfairness, right, of this text, right? That the text is worried about women because the text is worried about control of women in society. However, some of the stories we're going to look at are not so worried about that, right? And are kind of more interested in the vows that are happening. So we're having here we're going to set up here a kind of dialogue between this legal text, right, which has this particular view of how the family should work, right, and some stories about vows, right, in which things are a little bit different than that. Does that help? Did I answer your question?
I'm just thinking what you were trying to say about the underlying message
Right.
and the impact it has on the family
Right.
structure and the community, tribal structure. And it would seem that if the impacts would be the same, if a man did these same vows that disrupted the
Right.
Please speak louder.
Sorry, I'll repeat it so that people online can hear. Wouldn't, tell me if I'm getting this right, wouldn't it be so that a husband making vows would impact the family just as much as a wife making vows, right? Why does the Torah not say that? Well, first of all, welcome to patriarchy. That's it's just not fair, right? That's but we could imagine in an alternate universe where we have a more egalitarian Torah, right? We could imagine the Torah saying, maybe you have to check in with your spouse before making a vow that impacts the entire family, right? Or if you're a minor child, maybe you have to check in with your parents before vowing that you will, live under a bridge for 2 months. We could imagine a set of laws that had, that was more about like genuine impact on the family and less about kind of social control. We could imagine such a thing. It's not what we got, but we could imagine it.
I know you're headed there, but what about somebody making a vow for an unborn child? For what?
For an unborn child.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's actually the case I want to go to next. So let's look at that. So that's in source 2. And actually, I wish I had more of this story, but I'll tell more of the story. It's actually a really great story. So this is a story from the book of Judges. It's a story about the birth of Samson. Right, Samson is a military hero, right, who defends the Israelite nation. And I'm getting an echo. I think somebody has to mute online. Thank you. Samson's born in a very interesting way. So his mother,
Please sit down.
please. his mother, who is meditating in a field, apparently, an angel appears to her. Right? The angel says the following. This is in your source too. An angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, you are infertile, you are barren and have borne no child, but you shall conceive and bear a son. So this is a typical angel annunciation scene from the Bible. It's, it's not that uncommon in the Bible for angels to appear to announce babies. Now, be careful to drink no wine or other intoxicant, or to eat anything unclean, for you are going to conceive and bear a son. Let no razor touch his head, for the boy is to be a Nazarite to God from the womb on. So essentially, the angel says to her, your child will be a Nazir for his entire life. Like that is sort of God's decree for this child, right? And therefore, you must be a Nazir, right, during the time of your pregnancy, right? So that he will have, right, no wine, he will not have, right, and all the other restrictions that are appropriate to the Nazir.
There are teachings or traditions about the origin of this Nazir status.
We don't really know about the origin of it. It seems to be a kind of alternate voluntary priesthood.
Okay.
That really is what it seems to be, is a Nazir or a Nazirah. You can, any gender person can be a Nazir. A Nazir or a Nazirah doesn't cut their hair. When they stop being a Nazirah or a Nazir, they cut the hair and they make it an offering. And during the time of their Nazirut, they don't drink alcohol, they don't eat grapes, and they don't ever go near the dead. And if you should happen to be in a room with someone who dies, you have to start your Nazariteship over. So it's similar in a way to the way that a Kohen, right, in the tradition doesn't go near a dead person. So it's a kind of voluntary priesthood that can be taken on through a vow, right? So here's another case where taking a vow is extremely significant, where you can kind of become a sort of priest, right, by taking this vow. So that's what's happening to her, right? She's becoming this sort of Nazarite priestess figure for the time of her pregnancy, right? And then her son is going to have this status. Now, I don't have it here in the text, but what's really funny about this story and interesting from the point of view of our discussion about vows in the family, she goes home, she tells her husband what happened. Her husband's name is Manoah. We don't know what her name is. The Midrash calls her Tzleil Punit, which is a kind of strange long name, but they picked from the book of Chronicles. Calls her Tzleil Punit. Tzleil Punit goes home to tell her husband, an angel talked to me, we're going to have a child, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, wait a minute. I need to talk to the angel myself.
Reasonable.
Huh?
Reasonable.
Reasonable. So she goes back to the field and she meditates. And the angel returns. And I love this. She says, can you wait a minute? I have to get my husband. She appears, he appears again, the angel appears to her, right? Like only to her for the second time. So she runs, the angel's waiting for her in the field. Can you imagine saying to an angel, can you wait? She runs, she gets
I can't.
she gets her husband, she comes back. And her husband asks, could you tell us all about the, what is to be done for the child? And he says, I already told your wife. So the angel was really like, actually, this is between me and her, thank you for your concern, but I already gave her the instructions that she needs. So the husband says, okay, can I give you a meal before you go? I mean, he's an angel and he doesn't eat, or they are an angel and they don't eat, but he wants to make a meal. So the angel says, fine, if you would like to make a meal for me, just make an offering. So they build an altar, they make an offering, and the angel rises up to heaven in the flames of the fire. Wow. And the husband is completely flipped out. She's like, we're going to die. We saw God. And the wife says, I don't think we're going to die, because I think if we were going to die, God wouldn't have said the things that God said to us and wouldn't have taken an offering for us. I really think it's fine. So, this is clearly meant to be comedy, kind of the relationship between the two of them, and she's perfectly calm about the angel and he's utterly flipped out. But it's also a comment on the text we're reading, right? Because this is a case where, right, she's being involved, right, in this Nazariteship. And the husband wants to be involved. The angel basically says, you know what? It's okay for you to not be in on this one. Like, we have already taken care of it. So this is a really different sort of scenario, from the Torah text that we just saw. And probably intentionally, it's probably supposed to be a kind of joke about family relationships, right? Where the husband is like, I want to be in charge, and the wife is like, we already took care of it. I'm not saying that this should be true of your relationship. I believe in egalitarian relationships, but I think the Bible is trying to be funny, right? In what it's saying, and it is suggesting, right, that these vows could actually be a source of conflict within the family, probably both ways, right? That someone might take a vow and it might have a big impact on the family, and the husband or wife, right, might be upset about that. Right, so the Bible understands that that can happen and is sort of making a humorous story about that. Please, and then I'm coming to you.
In the story you're telling, it doesn't have to be an oath or a vow. The angel saying, do it.
I am so sorry. Could you speak a little bit louder, please? Thank you.
I think, yeah, please do, and then I'll repeat it if people can't hear.
Yeah, so the couple doesn't have even much agency in the decision. They're just being told what to do. And they can say, I'll try.
Right, right. Does that say anything about our case in terms of vows? Do you think, like,
Well, but I'm not sure.
you're not sure this counts as a vow, right? Right, it typically would be a vow, right? In this case, it seems to be imposed from heaven. Yes, you're absolutely right. Please.
The Chachamim in the Talmud really discouraged people to become a Nazir because
Yes.
they thought it was wrong you to actively do something to separate yourself from the community.
Right.
And so they really discourage people from making vows in general, but specifically were against people to declare themselves a Nazir because they thought it was wrong for you to actively do something to separate yourself from the community.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to repeat that and then I'll say something about it. So the comment is, the Talmud is concerned about people becoming a Nazir, that they have right, they prefer that people not do that, right, because it separates someone from the community. Also, probably, the Talmud doesn't like priesthood in general. It certainly doesn't like priesthood that you can take on voluntarily, right? The Talmud is actually actively trying to shut down this practice. From my perspective, that's an interesting shift, right, from the biblical, right, kind of from the biblical culture where this is something that people did regularly, right, to another, to a Jewish culture where they're not so happy about this practice. And it's not forbidden, but they're trying to discourage people from doing it. Yeah.
Just vis-a-vis the phrase imposed by heaven. One of the beautiful things about the Jewish tradition is, okay, we'll take the voice from heaven into account. And it's like, there's that joke, okay, we have a third opinion now, kind of thing. And I'm reminded of my first spiritual teacher, actually my guru, Nay Albert Rudolph, nicknamed Rudy, and one of the first Westerners to be named a Swami, Swami Rudraనంda, who said, don't let anyone lay a trip on you, not even God.
Thank you for that. I think there's lots in the Talmud that would probably resonate with that. That's cool. Let's look at another couple of vow cases, and I particularly want to look at some from the Talmud, but I just want to remind us that some of the most famous vows in the Bible are Ruth and Naomi and Hannah, right? We have a vow from Ruth, right? Where you go, I will go, right? So this is the text from Ruth. This is in source 3, right? They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth clung to her. Actually, maybe somebody else. Well, you know what is better, because I think people can hear better if I read. So she said, see, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law. But Ruth replied, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may Yud He Vav He do to me if anything but death parts me from you. So this is clearly a vow, right? It's not a Nazir vow, right? But this is a vow, right? Which Ruth is then obligated to fulfill, right? This is her vow to be family with Naomi and not leave.
Just, I can't let this go without singing the song. Al tifkei bi le'azmeach לשוב מאחריי, כאשר תלכי אליי. Where you sleep, I will sleep also. Amech, Ami, Elohai, Elohai, כאשר תמותי אמות, ושם אקבר. Sorry.
Thank you.
Don't apologize.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Bravo.
So we also have Hannah's vow, right? So this is Ruth's, right? Very important vow to the Jewish people. We have Hannah's vow, right? The vow, right? If I will become pregnant, right, and have a child, I will bring the child and give him as a priest, right, at Shiloh. Right. So we have Hannah's vow also. So these vows have really big impacts, right? And you can notice that a lot of them are around fertility, which might have actually been the case, right? I mentioned some of them about war, right? Clearly in the Tanakh, we have a number of them around fertility. So here are some from the Mishnah. Time. Okay. So if you look in source 5, and we're going to look at source 5 and 5a. So this is about a character that you might or might not know about. Her name is Helene, or Helene, and she's the queen of a kingdom called Adia Bene that converted to Judaism. So she's a
Spell that.
you can see
Oh,
it.
it's there.
It's right in the text. You can see it in source 5. She's often described in the Talmud. One of the things that they talk about in the Talmud is what her sukkah looked like. He had a giant sukkah with lots of rooms. And the Talmud asks a question about, are you allowed to have a sukkah with a lot of rooms? And they ask the question about her sukkah. And one of the things that she is famous for is being a Nezirah. She took an oath of Nezirut. So she took an oath to become a Nazir. So if you look in source 5. Oh, actually, I see that there's a question or a comment. Amy, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi. In looking at the Midrash says, it says there are 3 situations when it is commendable for a God-fearing Jew to make a vow, provided he's aware of his commitment. The first one is if someone has a sinful habit, he can take a vow to resolve it, and I think they do that at the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. They take I believe. I've never been to one, but I think they do. The second one is if a mitzvah is presents itself to someone, he may swear to fulfill it so as not to miss the opportunity. And the third one is if there's a tradition from our forefather Jacob to make a vow in times of distress, because remember when Jacob was in distress and he vowed, I'll give 1/10 of my whatever I had to you.
Right.
Those are the 3 situations where a vow is appropriate or
Thank you.
commendable.
I really appreciate it, Amy. And I appreciate particularly you're reminding us that one of the first vows that we get in the Torah is the vow of Jacob, right, at Bethel, right after his dream, right, where he says, right, if you give me food to eat and bring me safely on my journey, right, I'll give you 1/10 of everything, right. So that's actually we see that we see that vow happening.
First tithings, is that where tithing 10% began?
Might be. The tithe is also described in the text on Shavuot and the harvest, but yeah. So this is what happens with Queen Helene. So we're in source 5. So Helene, the queen of Adia Bene, her son went off to war. And she says, if my son comes home whole and in one piece, I shall be a Nezirah for 7 years. Indeed, her son did come home from war, and she was a Nazirah for 7 years. (5a). Her son having gone to war, right? Helene made a vow that if he should return safe, she would become a Nazirite for the span of 7 years. She fulfilled her vow, and at the end of 7 years went to Palestine, or was then Palestine, Israel. The Hillelites told her that she must observe her vow anew. So in other words, she interrupted her vow, right, by changing places from out of the Holy Land to in the Holy Land. So they tell her she's got to start over. She therefore lived as a Nazirite for 7 more years. At the end of the second 7 years, she became impure, right? She attracted Tuma, right? She must have been in the presence of a dead body or something like that. And she had to repeat her Naziriteship, thus becoming a Nazirite for 21 years. Rabbi Judah said she was a Nazirite for 14 years only. What do we think is the impact of this story about Queen Helene? I'm curious what people think. Why is the Talmud telling this story and its addendum?
Because it's overly involved with the whole purity question. As one rebellious voice from the corner here.
One possibility, right, is that they're really freaked out about the importance of the purity of Nazirites. Maybe that could be.
Maybe that they're just showing the danger of taking the vow.
Maybe they want to discourage taking vows by saying, you see, if you become a Nazir, you could end up having to do it for 21 years.
Well, it's really bothering me is that you have human intervention.
Speak up.
You have human intervention when people are deciding if your vow is to with God, and here are people saying, "Oh no, you got to do it again," and then after you do it again, now so it's the people intervening where vows between you and God.
Can you repeat that? I don't think people.
I'm gonna say.
So I changed the.
Sorry, I have a little throat problem.
It's okay. It's the mic it's hard to pick up. So the question is, why are the rabbis intervening in this vow? Right? Isn't the vow between her and God? Right? Shouldn't a vow be between a person and God? Why are the rabbis adjudicating how long Helene has to complete her vow? So this is, I think, another layer of this. In addition to discouraging people to take a vow, the rabbis want control over the vows. Notice how similar this is to the Torah text, where human beings are intervening in the vows, right? Where the Torah text says anybody can make a vow and it's to God, except, right, if you're a daughter, right, then somebody else has to approve your vow first, right? It seems like the rabbis are doing something similar, right, by saying, right, this vow we are going to decide, right, we are going to decide whether the Nazirite vow has been fulfilled appropriately, right, or whether there's more time that must be had. So there's a kind of tug of war, right? Notice how these vows are very individual, right? They're in between people and God, and then the communal authorities want to get involved, right? It makes them nervous, right? These interactions that are directly between people and God. Asha Chaim, I saw you had a hand up, please.
Right, I just put it in the chat. I believe Helene Hamalka is not Jewish, and just as
Did we lose you?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Was
can we look at the chat? I think great.
Oh wait, can you not hear Asher Haim or?
I believe that Helene
So
Hamalka.
Asher Chaim wrote, just as non-Jews were able to bring sacrifices to the temple, Queen Helene could become a Nazirite with all the rabbinic laws and restrictions. Yeah, she's not a non-Jew. She's a convert. So she can do everything that other Jews, the other Jews can do. But yes, there are things that even people who aren't Jews can do in the temple. That's okay. Thank you.
Wait, sorry, Joe, can you not hear people online?
All right. So I want to look at a few more of these. And lots of people make vows. It is kind of unusual how much the Talmud mentions women around this. And one of the things that shows us is that these vows could be taken by anybody. You didn't have to have a high social status to take them. Right? That's part of probably why that everybody's upset about it. So look in source 6. So this is about King Agrippa's sister Berenice. So she's a royal person of the Jewish nation. She's in Jerusalem on account of a Nazirite vow that she took before the outbreak of the Great War against the Romans. So people know who Josephus is. Josephus is a Jewish historian who writes for a Roman audience, and he tells the history of the Jewish people. And Josephus writes, now she dwelt then at Jerusalem in order to perform a vow which she had made to God. For it is usual with those that had been either afflicted with a distemper or with any other distresses to make vows, and for 30 days before they are to offer their sacrifices to abstain from wine and to shave the hair of their head. Right, so this is a 30-day Nazirite vow. You can make a temporary Nazirite vow, right? And this is the custom, and this matches with what was said earlier, right? If someone is afflicted with some kind of illness, right, or they have some other kind of distress, right, this would be a typical way of attempting to mediate that or intervene in that. Which things Berenice was now performing, and stood barefoot before Florus's tribunal and besought him to spare the Jews. So kind of imagine this as a painting, right? Princess Berenice, right, comes before, right, the Roman tribunal, and because she's a Nazirite, right, she's got long wild hair, right, and she is barefoot, right? So it's like a hermit, right, or some kind of renunciate person, right, who's coming before the Roman tribunal to plead on behalf of the Jews. It's kind of an extraordinary image. Yet she could neither have reverence paid to her, nor could she escape without some danger of being slain herself. I don't know how this worked out historically, but I think it's really kind of an astonishing moment, right? And this was, in that time period where Jews are theoretically running Jerusalem, but really the Romans are in charge, right? And then there's a lot of danger around that. Right, anything about this? Oh, and actually, let's just add in the quote from Gela Kornfeld. Women Nazirites were mentioned on tombstones in first century Palestine, right? So this is in the time of the Mishnah, right? So in first century, right, this would have been in sort of the Roman era of the land of Israel, right? Where we have lots of gravestones from that time period because they were underground, they were in catacombs, so we have lots of people's gravestones. And you will often see people's titles on their gravestone. So if you were an elder of a community, or you were the head of the synagogue, which by the way was a position that belonged to both men and women. Oh yeah, there's this wonderful work that was done by, Bernadette Bruton, who analyzed these tombstones because it used to be thought that these were like honorary titles like Rebbitzin. And then she was able to show, no, look, her husband doesn't have the same title. He's got a different title.
What's her last name?
Bernadette Bruton, Brooten. She wrote a whole thing on this. And she showed that what the Talmud says about women never having communal authority wasn't true. And we know because of the gravestones. Like there were men and women elders of the community. There were men and women heads of community, donors. So like first, second, third century CE. Yeah.
So
Let me just say one more thing. Yeah. We even see the term priestess on Jewish women's gravestones. So like they were doing something that was much more diverse than what the Talmud actually says about this. Yeah.
One is reminded of of John the Baptist in his wildness, eating locusts and being really like a wild man.
Right.
And also that whole thing of his head being asked for and the dance of the seven veils.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's right. There were these kind of hermit figures, right, who were, I'm thinking a little bit about like the people in India who devote themselves to, to going out and holy begging. Like it feels a little bit like that,
Even with the John the Baptist shout out, thank you. Mary Magdalene, who has the long hair and washes the feet of Jesus. And,
Yeah.
we love Josephus because he's one of the two extra biblical sources attesting to the existence of Jesus and also to John the Baptist and to these other characters. So
The royal, we love that.
So, right, so some of what we're seeing is that the law is not necessarily how it was, right? We actually might see a much more diverse picture, right, than the, the law is, making it look the same. So I just want to note that Gayla Kornfeld says that on these tombstones that Bernadette Bruton studied, and many scholars study this whole corpus of tombstones. You can always tell if something's important in the community if people put it on the gravestone. So for example, in London, if you're a midwife, it goes on your gravestone. If you're a doctor, it goes on your gravestone, right? So that meant that was important to the community. They would put the term Nazir or Nazirah on the gravestone. So these women Nazirah were mentioned on the gravestone. And it said that they were veils that were prepared by 82 maidens. What's significant about that is 82 women made the curtain for the Holy of Holies. So, right, these veils are sacred. So I don't know more about this veil practice, but that sure is interesting to me. So we're also seeing a kind of, think about the way that being a nun in medieval society, like, might give you access to certain kinds of spiritual and intellectual experience that you couldn't have in any other way. Right, that was also true of monks, right? But particularly for women who didn't have access to education, right? Becoming a nun was a way that you could get that. You had to give up a lot of things, right? But that was a way that you could get that. So it's, it's interesting to think about what did becoming a Nazir or a Nazirah, what might have been the social benefit of that, right? In addition to all the disabilities of that, right? How might your community have treated you, right, if you were in that position of being a Nazir or a Nazirah? Yeah.
Why 82? That's a number that I've never seen specified anywhere.
I also don't know why 82. I really don't know. With the Holy of Holies, I think it had specifically to do with the number of panels that they had to make. So maybe it was kind of an idiosyncratic number.
it resolves to one. The portions of the Holy of Holies of 1 to 1 to 1.
That's nice.
No, I don't know.
That's nice. Yeah, but I think it may have actually had to do with the weaving of the panels. Yeah. All right, let's actually look at Mishnah Kiddushin. Oh, actually, how much time do we have? We really have to, I want us to read about
When do you want to end?
we need to end at 8:45. I mean, 9:45, 15 minutes, okay. I'll just then summarize source 7, which basically is that for most kinds of offerings, men laid on hands, but women did not. That had to do with the men could go farther into the temple than women could, except for a Nazirite woman, right? And a sota, that's another case, which I won't talk about right now. But except for a Nazirite woman, she could waive her offering. So that was actually an exception to some of the temple differences of the time, was the Nazirite offering. All right, now I want to give us a little bit of comic relief. And I want us to look at 8 and 9, where they're talking about what kinds of Nazirite vows you can make. Okay, ready?
No.
One who said, "Behold, I am a Nazir," right? And his friend heard and said, "I am too." And his friend heard and said, "I am too." They are all Nazirite. Right? That's the law. If the first one releases from his vow, all are released. Because apparently the second and third are contingent on the first. So if the first one says, "I annul my Nazirite vow," the other two are also annulled. If the last one releases, the last one is released, but the others are restricted. If he said, "Behold, I am a Nazir," and his friend heard and said, "My mouth is like his mouth," or my hair is like his hair, behold, the second one is a Nazir. If he said, behold, I am a Nazir, and his wife heard and said, I am too, he may annul her vow and his vow remains. If she said, behold, I am a Nazir, and her husband heard and said, I am too, he is not able to annul. Do you understand why? Right, because he made the vow, right, contingent on her vow. That means it's also his vow, and he cannot annul his own vow.
Complicated.
Right? So now they're both Nazirine. If he said, behold, I am a Nazir, and you, wait, that's not right. Hold on. But if he said, behold, I am a Nazir, and you, and she said, amen, he may annul her vow and his vow remains. If she said, I am a Nazir, and you, and he said, amen, he's not able to annul the vow. Right? Right. So this is right. So they're thinking about all the implications of this difference, right, between how they understood men and women. Yeah.
Is behold I am a Nazir the original declaration of the vow, or they already took the vow and they're just stating I?
Oh, no, this is the declaration of the vow. This is actually the declaration of the vow. This is him. Harani Nazir, sorry. Right, like saying that, right? Even if you didn't say I am vowing, if you say that phrase, it's understood that that's what you're doing, right? You're making that vow. All right, here's the one about drinking. This is in source 9. If they poured one a cup of wine, and the person said, I'm a Nazirite, and therefore I will refrain from it, that person is a full-fledged Nazirite, right? An incident occurred with regard to a certain woman who was intoxicated, and they poured a cup for her, and she said, I'm a Nazirite, and will refrain from it. The sages said this woman did not intend to accept Naziriteship, but rather meant to say it is forbidden to me as an offering. She vowed against deriving benefit from that cup alone, since she did not want to drink anymore. So what's the case? Right? What they're describing is a colloquialism. Like you're sitting in a bar, your friends are all drinking, you've had enough, they bring you a cup of wine, you say, oh, I'm a Nazirite. It's like a colloquialism. It's like, it means I'm not going to drink anymore.
It's like saying I'm a vowed teetotaler.
Right, exactly. And the Talmud says we understand that this is not serious. Right? The person is not saying I'm going to be a Nazirite, right? They're saying, I'm done drinking. Right? So they're right. So they're
Is it a polite way of saying thanks, but no thanks?
It's a funny way of saying, yeah, exactly. Right. Everybody's pressuring you. Come on, have another one. Oh, I'm a Nazirite.
You know, to go back just to the real concept of what an oath or a vow is, I'm very confused still.
Okay, please.
If you make if you make a remark, like I'm a Yankee fan, is that a vow?
It sure is in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is it anything we say considered a vow?
I think
Or do you have to say, this is my vow? And I'll go back.
Yeah.
When we do Yister, we say, I'm gonna pledge to give money without making a vow.
Yeah.
So, in today's world, we do contracts when we're serious about something. We don't make a vow.
Right, right. So this is why you will sometimes hear in a traditional community, people say bli neder without a vow. So I might say, like, I'm going to come by your business tomorrow, bli neder, right? So that bli neder, bli without, neder, a vow. So it's a way of saying, I'm making you a promise, but it's not really a vow. So sometimes you'll hear that in a traditional Jewish community because of the concern that you're raising. Is anything that I say that's a commitment going to be taken as a vow, right? If I say, I'm going to visit you tomorrow, is that a vow? Like if I don't fulfill it, is God going to be mad at me?
What's that?
So there is that concern. But here specifically because of the quality of the Nazirite, I think there's a lower bar. Like they think it's more likely that you're making a vow. If you say I'm a Nazir, then you are probably making a vow.
Which hardly ever comes up in today's world.
Right.
I haven't met it.
Right. Right.
Oh, there are a lot of undercover ones that you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I haven't met.
Yeah, well, you've met them, you just don't know.
They're not.
Jill next to you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a big part of why we don't see Nazarites running around today is because there's no, you can't make the offering to get you out of it at the end, so the only way to do it is doing it for life.
What's the usual offering to get you out of it?
At the temple.
Yeah, you would,
Need to offer an animal.
and your hair, and your hair,
So,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah, people, there are communities that still do this today, like I
You
think in the Rastafarian community, like this is still considered an active thing, but like, you know,
they
in
actually
general.
make an offering.
I don't know if they make an offering, but in general, Jews don't do this today.
Since the destruction of the second temple, we're all considered Tameh, so.
Right.
If you're Tameh, you cannot make a vow.
Yeah.
Tameh,
If you are ritually impure, unable to go into the
Tameh
temple.
it's called.
Tameh, right, or Tameh, right, exactly. All right, let's where are we? I wanna bring us in for a landing. So I just want to look at Rambam. Yeah, 11. So Maimonides is talking about the question of inebriated states. And he says the story is not is actually, you know what, this is too complicated. Let's go to source 12. This is Rabbi Lisa Grushko. So she is thinking about the Nazarite vow. And she says, so how might Nazarite practice be explained in light of our knowledge about addiction? We know that for recovering alcoholics, a sip of alcohol has a different effect than it would on anyone else. The rabbinic concept of building a fence around the law then could have a very tangible meaning, right? That we avoid not only alcohol, but also ingredients used to make it as a way of separating ourselves from temptation. So she then talks about how, well, she says, likewise, avoiding contamination by the dead could be understood as distancing oneself from associations in one's previous life as an addict, a path that can lead to a return from addiction and ultimately to death. And not cutting one's hair, perhaps that could be seen as a commitment to humility, to valuing the integrity of internal choices over external appearances. Also, as some commentators suggest, the fact that Nazarites can be recognized as such allows others to help them on their paths by reminding them of their commitment. So what she wants to do is imagine that this actually, one of the reasons that Talmud often talks about Nizirut in relationship to alcohol is, right, because that was a thing that you didn't do as a Nazir, and that maybe this could have been a way of interrupting an addiction, right? She imagines that perhaps becoming a Nazir might have had that impact for some people, which I think is interesting. But let's talk a little bit, in the time that we have left. Yeah, we actually are almost out of time, but maybe we can make one or two comments. So what can we learn about this practice today, right? As you know, as we've said, we don't generally see Nazarites in the Jewish community today, but there's something really quite powerful about the way that being a Nazarite operated in terms of kind of creating this intense spiritual state for a person, right? That was recognized by the people around them. I, like, many of you have sat in shul at Yom Kippur, right? And have, had this annulment of vows washed over me, and have certainly imbibed this Jewish reticence to make vows, right? Avoidance of, making commitment that perhaps I might not be able to fulfill, right? So how can I make a vow to do something if there's a possibility that the circumstances would make it not possible for me to do that thing, right? It's a kind of human humility, right? Even if I really intend to do something, it's still possible that something could happen to me, right? That would mean that I couldn't do that thing, right? So I have a certain instinctive appreciation of that humility, and there's something really powerful about this practice. So I wonder what people think about that.
Well, I kind of go the opposite way. To me, vows started with God. And God can make vows because God is all powerful. And so it feels to me like it's a mortal's attempt to be godlike. I mean, God can make a vow and we keep it. It's covenantal. I guess is what I'm saying. And to act like like you have that power, it seems to be almost the opposite of humility.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense to me, right? I'll just repeat it in case folks couldn't hear. That making a vow with God is a covenantal. It's like making a covenant, and it makes us act. It makes us try to act like God, right? It's as if we're God. If we can make a vow that will stick, right? That's like a godly thing to do. Cool. What else, please?
You spoke before about the rabbis versus the temple and the priests. And, you know, when it all first started, it was a very physical religion with the sacrifices. And nobody knows what a sacrifice really is, but just the visual thing made people spiritual. And today we are so intellectual, you know, it's so, nobody really believes in anything. Everything they say means nothing. They make no promises. They make no vows. They don't do anything. And God doesn't really exist. He just comes in from time to time. You know, nobody knows from anything. And sometimes I wonder that the rabbis may have made a mistake because, and I don't want to do, you know, anyone who's a vegetarian, but on Sukkot, when they used to slaughter bulls day and night, I mean, that was a holiday. I mean, it was something about it. So, a barbecue.
A barbecue.
I understand what you're saying, right? There's an embodied quality to this, and there's a sense of it matters. It's not an abstract, like, concept you can play with, right? If you make a vow, you made a vow. You made it to a real entity, right? That exists between you. I understand what you're saying, right? So there's a certain desire, perhaps, as we read this story, it could be that like there's a desire for the sense of the reality of it, right? It's not conditional, right? We can't just make it go away, right? It's a real relationship. It's a real commitment. I appreciate that, right? There's a sense of the potential embodiment of this sort of practice. I'll take one more and then we got to.
There's this remark in British English that is, would that saying made it so? And so thinking about the covenant and being godlike, you could also look back to Genesis, where there's no distinction at all between the speech act and the event. That saying it's happening, it's happened. And that this delay between the act of speech and the act itself is, we're always trying to close that.
Nice.
That's spoke the morality.
Yeah, right. The God, right. It's like words create worlds, like the sense of the deep connection. All right, I'm going to take.
Sorry, just muted on this side. I'm assuming that Jill wants to speak online. We have two different Jills.
Yes, this is the other Jill.
Incredible. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, online, and then the people in the room. Can you guys hear other Jill online?
Hello. Okay, I'm other Jill. Yes.
Good.
I'm a taller non-rabbi version of Jill. Yes. Hi. I guess I should show my face anyway. So yeah, I think the idea of growing your hair and something like is very, as the Rastafarians know, is very spiritual about your connection with God. Even like, I have a lot of hair. It's all on top of my head today, but something about untangling the knots and just caring for that adds intentionality. And you're also showing an outward sign, much like people who, have the talis coming out of their, or the tzitzit, coming from their shirt. It's showing outwardly your vow to God. And I agree. I think there's something about not just intellectualizing things away and having that embodied promise that, we could use a little bit more of.
Thank you so much. However, we're running a little late, so we can take one sentence from each of you folks. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Who are you calling on, her or me?
All right, Iva, why don't you go ahead since you haven't spoken yet?
Ladies first.
What I wanted to say, what this brought up for me was the whole issue of keeping your word. And so whether it's a vow or it's not, I think it's one of the most difficult things, at least for me. For those of us who overpromise, it's a really tremendous struggle to keep your promises and keep your word on what you say or hope to do.
with and for others. So I think for me, in reading this text, the differences here that you brought up between women and men and what the expectations are. And the notion of like, what's between us and ourselves and what's between us and God and what's between us and another human being. When we make a promise or we make a vow, this text is pointing to how serious it is, even if it's just a small thing. Because if you can't keep your word, then just everything goes haywire, no matter what circumstance, so.
Great, thank you. So the seriousness of keeping your word. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Two brief things from India, both of them. My teacher or our teacher, Krishnamurti, said to say I am is already exploitation. To even say I am someone or something is already going down the wrong path of dominating others. That's A. B, Vivekananda beautifully was very anti-vegetarian, and he was asked by an Orthodox Brahmin or two, so what was the greatest day in India, the glorious day? And he said, when 3 Brahmins cut up a cow and ate it all on the same day. Just love that.
I want to thank everybody. I feel like I've learned a lot from everyone as we've talked about this. Thank you for studying Parshat Matot. Please, we're gonna head for shul now.
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Yasher koach, Rav. Yasher koach.
Good book.